Can you hear me now? Oh, okay. All right. You guys can go all the way back there if you want then, I guess. Since you guys were back there. No? We're going to wait for the Zoom to start so that we can make sure everybody's on the same page. Oh, live stream. Yes. Now I get it.
Because in the eyes of the camera, you're on behind that pole right now. Or you were.
Can the live stream people see me? Okay. Yeah, I did. Yeah, just check and see if that works. Okay, hi. So welcome to week 1 for Apologetics. So this topic, I think, is one of the most exciting when it comes to how we can advance our faith and our understanding in the church. It's something that I think will require for you to really start to understand and understand the depth of both our faith and of the field of apologetics. It'll be kind of a lifelong thing. This is just like a taste, a primer, so you kind of get the field a little bit, get the study of apologetics, understand that. But if you truly dive into it, it is like a journey, over the course of your life, to try to really start to use apologetics in the way that you understand the church and the faith. So it's a little bit of a beast, of a topic to sort of just try to dive into, but we'll talk a little bit about why we're talking about it, and essentially the purpose of it for you, and then for when you are a servant and you're teaching. So thank you for being here so that we can dive in. Okay. So I wanted to define a little bit about what apologetics is. So I'm going to start off by telling you what apologetics is and then what it isn't. So apologetics comes from the Greek court. So this is kind of like a painting of what the Greek court would have looked like, right? So the apologetics comes from the Greek word apologeia. So this is kind of what a Greek court looks like. It's not that much different than a court you'd find in the United States somewhere. But basically what I wanted to demonstrate in this picture is that what would happen is the prosecution, right? The team that's prosecuting the defendant, they would give what's called a categoria. This is the crimes or the reason that we're holding this court is to indict you with this categoria. This is it's like a speech in support of the prosecution, right? And then the person who's the defendant would have to, who's in the center stage, would then have to give what's called an apologeia. This is a defense, okay? So apologeia, defense. This is essentially the concept that's behind apologetics, is a defense of the faith. So you'll find apologetics can be used for anything. So if you stepped on someone's toe and then they yelled at you and you say, oh, I'm sorry, it's I shined my foot and this and that, that's your defense, right? That's your apologeia. And so you can even see that it kind of comes from apology too, right? So it's not quite an apology. And so what it's not this, okay? It's not sorry. It's not sorry, but you're wrong. It's not this over apology. It's not related to apologies at all. It's a confident defense in of your faith, right? And so that's essentially the entire field of apologetics, is how do we defend our faith? How do we justify it? If someone comes to you, or even within your own mind, if you're considering really thinking about your faith, and there's a hesitation, the apologia is the defense, right? How do you defend the faith, right? Can anybody remind me of a historical figure in the church who's very famous, who defended the faith? Saint Athanasius is the defender, right? We call him the defender of the faith. So he is like one of the original apologists, right? And you will find over the course of this that there are apologists that from the very beginning, right? You can even consider St. Paul, who was a convert to the faith, as an apologist. And all the way even until now, we have some, apologists in our church and in other Orthodox churches, right? And this is a critical verse. This is a critical piece of the scripture that basically gives us the reason for why we're talking about this at all, why this is even a field, okay? Can anybody read it for me? Stop me. Maria, please. Can you read it? Yeah. Is it the font? I was worried that the font would be weird. You can read it. Okay. Yeah. So, the clear piece of this verse is always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you with meekness and fear, right? So I don't think it can be clearer than that, right? This is a Catholic epistle. It cannot be clearer than that. So I want you to just substitute for defense apologeia, right? Always be ready to give an apologeia to everyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you with meekness and fear, right? So this is kind of the spirit of apologetics. This is kind of the concept, right? How not only are we being asked to defend about the hope that we have in us, that's our faith, but we are asked to do that with meekness and fear. So we're going to talk about that too as we kind of introduce this topic. This is our command, this is our ask, right? And I also want you to substitute, when you see everyone, I also want to substitute your own mind, right? You want to be able to synthesize what you're getting from your surroundings, what you're learning in school, what you're learning from others, and I want you to be able to reconcile that with something that you define as the truth, right? So the truth is the truth no matter what you think it is, but ultimately we're trying to arrive at truth, arrive at a faith that you feel is a comprehensive faith. So if you feel sometimes that you come to church and you learn one thing and you go to school and you learn something else and you have this split mind, right? That's going to lead to a lukewarm faith, right? That we're just constantly having to reconcile. And that's a lot of energy, right? Constant energy trying to keep one thing in one compartment and keep something in something else, right? The goal of apologetics is not necessarily to do this, but it does help to take those pieces and put it together. It's okay. I think that a lot of times there's the conservative nature of our church says that we, that our churches, the church teaching is sacred, and the secular teaching, the school teaching is not sacred. That's true, but they both may have true characteristics, and so combining those is what brings you to that comprehensive faith, right? It brings you to a strong faith where you have no doubt because you're able to sort of reconcile those pieces. So you can tell that this is going to start to involve everything that you've ever learned and how you can combine that with what you learn in the church and what you learn in the faith, right? So this is the Abuna Gregory Bichet wrote our material, if you guys are familiar with him. And this is his sort of subtitle for this topic, and it's increasing the depth of your faith, increasing faith depth by removing doubt. So this is the spiritual purpose of studying apologetics. This is the reason why it's important for you, right? We're not studying this for everybody else that's around us. We're studying this for us. And the reason we're doing that is spiritual purpose. It's not just intellectual, it's spiritual. So it's increasing your depth in your faith, like we talked about, by removing doubt, okay? Because sometimes what happens is doubt gets introduced by stuff we learn in school, by people we talk to, by many other ideas that we're getting from media and so on. And so I want you to be able to piece together what is actually true. So I wanted to sort of set some ground rules, and so this is called the ground. This is my I'm calling it the ground rules of apologetics. So when we talk about apologetics, I think what can happen is even in this room, even within our church, the Coptic Orthodox Church, even within our diocese, there are different ideas about how to understand like what is true and what is real, and like to bring our faith in connection with like what we're seeing in the world around us. So that means even within this room, there may be differing opinions, and there may be even debates. And that's okay. That's totally encouraged. And I think that's why this is a little bit different than some of the other topics, because history is history, right? That's facts. We don't usually debate history unless you're like a history scholar, right? And you're able to show evidence. But this is one thing where there are some things that are unknowable, and there are some things that are knowable. And even amongst things that are knowable, there's debate. Things that are unknowable, of course, is going to be debate, right? So, but ultimately, ground rules are, in essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. In all things, charity. And this is attributed to St. Augustine of Hippo originally, but I think this it's probably been used by several other scholars along the way. But the concept is, in the things that we define as like the essential, our basis of understanding, right? We're just going to hold that as true and move forward, okay? So that is unity. We're all going to be united on these basic principles so that we can move forward. In non-essentials, if there are things that are not essential to believe, to hold to your faith, let bygones be bygones. Let people believe like what they believe, unless it's an essential piece that is part of our faith, right? And so, and in your mind too, I want you to feel free to believe something that has truth, right? That you feel has truth, but that has guidance from the spiritual fathers, that has guidance from the scripture, that has guidance within your own faith and your father of confession, right? Okay, and then finally, in all things charity, always give to the other, right? Let the other give and give to the other, okay? So this is the framework for this entire unit, okay? I want you to, this is directly from the material, and so as far as the test goes, don't be super worried. Like I will, there will be a study guide, and we'll be able to kind of synthesize, because there's a lot of information, and most of it does not necessarily need to be tested. It's more the concepts I want you to understand. So don't worry too much about the material and what's all in it. I just want you to be able to understand this conceptually, okay? So there are 4 levels here, and I believe that this Abuna Gregory has also fashioned this from other thoughts about how to look at apologetics. But there's level 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first level is the beefiest level. It's the meat and potatoes. It's the main thing. And basically, the first level is where a lot of apologetics focuses, is about God's existence, right? How do we defend God's existence? How do we understand God's existence from the world around us? Okay? How do we use other non-religious texts, non-religious or non-scripture, so not biblical texts, to define God's existence or to hint at God's existence, right? So that's level 1, and hopefully that the result of that, once we're done with that section, is that we understand God exists. And then in level 2, that is there one religion? So God exists, but is there one religion, or is there multiple religions? How did we arrive? How do we justify Christianity as a religion that fits with our concept of God and in relationship with God, right? Why is it Christianity and not Buddhism, for example, or a different faith with multiple gods? How did we arrive there? And then, okay, let's say we arrive at Christianity is a true faith, a faith that's consistent with one God. Within Christianity, as we know, there's several different sects, different beliefs, and so how did we get to the apostolic or Orthodox Christianity? And then in level 4, we can talk about how to increase the depth of our faith, even in the apostolic Christianity, and how do we because again, remember, the spiritual purpose of this is to gain, to grow deeper in our faith, and we can do that in level 4. So moving forward, this is kind of the outline, and hopefully we're going to hold to this. The topic is a little bit dense, and so it might take us a little while to get through some of the pieces, and we'll have to sort of maybe skimp out on other pieces, but hopefully we'll get through it. But this is generally the outline. In week 1, we're going to try to get through part of the historical piece of the level 1. Week 2, we're going to finish up the historical piece. Week 3, we're going to get into the philosophical and start level 2. And then week 4, we're going to be doing 3 and 4. And so you'll see the pages there that roughly corresponds with what we're going to try to do, okay? So let's start here with level 1. I also wanted to say that this is going to 100% bring up questions, and I encourage you to ask them. We're probably not going to always be able to answer them, and not only because we don't have time, but also because I don't have all the answers, and sometimes no one has answers, and it's kind of up to you to decide how you're going to understand it. But what I wanted to do is make sure that we gathered up those questions, because they're so valuable, and in the field of apologetics, questions is what drives the whole thing. So I want you to ask your questions, and we're going to be writing them on this Google Sheet. And then we can kind of go explore those later. So on my own time, I'll look into how to answer those questions. I'll discuss with KG. I'll discuss with some of the fathers and see if we can get some good answers for you guys. But I want to make sure that you guys ask your questions so we can write them down, okay? So we were getting into level 1. And so level 1, we can kind of break down, we can investigate this question about the existence of God through 3 different secular fields. And 1 is science, 2 is history, and 3 is philosophy, okay? So that's how we're going to break down. So first we're going to start with history. This is what brings us to the essentials. If you remember, the ground rules that we talked about is in essentials, unity. So I want to talk about what are the essentials for this level 1, okay? What do we believe? And if anybody asks you just this, and this probably doesn't happen that often, but if someone came out of the blue, just turned the corner and they came and asked you, hey, what's your religious belief, or what do you believe in? What would you tell them? Okay, so I'm Coptic Orthodox. Does that tell anybody anything about what you actually believe? I believe in God. Okay, so how does that differ you from someone who believes in 50 gods? I believe in one God. Okay, what does that kind of sound like? The Orthodox Creed, right? So we have a definition for what our belief is. It's clear. It's written so precisely. And honestly, in the course of this unit, we may not get into it, but truly understanding in-depth look at the Orthodox Creed is all you need to really understand the faith, okay? Because there is a lot of, the language is written so precisely to be perfectly what the church teaches in the dogma of the church. So if anybody asks you what you believe, we believe in one God, God the Father, and continue, and that is your belief. But I wanted to break that down into the relevant pieces for this section. So these are the essentials. This is what we believe in our faith. God created the world out of nothing by exercise of his own free will. And I want you to take a look at the highlighted words there, because those are the key words, that it was out of nothing, and he used his own free will to do it. He created it in time, so that means that not only did he use that it was within time-space continuum, that there was time related to how God created the earth, because we know that in the book of Genesis, which again, we're not going to get super into, but in the book of Genesis, God said how did he define the time that was, or when it was written by Moses, how did they define the time that was taken by the creation of the earth and the universe? In days, right? So we know that time had passed. And so that's how not only did time pass, but also in time, meaning that the time was perfect, right? That it was on time for what it was intended for, okay? that it was with both an adequate aim and end, okay? Meaning that there was a sufficient reason for the universe to be created, meaning there is a purpose, there is a goal, okay? And then that he orders it and guides it according to his almighty will and wisdom, which is his divine providence, right? That God has control and that God orders it and guides it according to his will and his wisdom, okay? So these are the essentials. So we're going to get into the science piece now. Okay, so I had a thought about giving you homework. I don't like homework, so I don't give you homework, but I give you reading for pleasure, okay? I highly, highly, highly encourage you to read this. I think that a lot of the questions that we feel like we need answered within our own church so that we can reconcile what we understand, like from science, specifically like the big piece about God's existence and evolution, right? That is such a heavy piece that I think our church, like we don't always get into it in the course of Sunday school because I think it requires a lot of understanding. But this piece that Abuna Moses wrote, this is from our diocese, Abuna Moses, he wrote this piece, and I think it's a wonderful way to start to look at how science and religion are actually compatible. Okay, he has this sort of facetious way of saying, why am I not allowed to believe in science? But truly what he argues for in this piece is that this is compatible. Science and religion are compatible, but it's the way that we look at them and their limitations and how they can come together, okay? So use the QR code. You guys have the slides, but I want you to read it. It's not that long. It's not required. I'm not going to test you on it, but I think it's highly, highly useful to you, okay? And so for each of the weeks, we're going to have a little piece like this, reading for pleasure, okay? So this is a critical piece, and so this is something I will definitely test you on. It's called intelligent design, okay? So this is directly from the material, and I want to give you an idea of, first of all, before you read the definition there, I want you to understand what the purpose of the studying intelligent design is. Intelligent design is, the purpose of it is to provide evidence for a creator based on the world around us. So it borrows concepts from science to then take what we see from the world around us and then give evidence that there is a creator, okay? So it's outside of our faith, meaning that it's not directly related to a religious understanding of God, but it points in that direction, right? That's kind of the purpose of that field, okay? So what is the theory? The theory is that some natural phenomena are best explained by an intelligent cause because in our experience, intelligence is the cause of their informational properties. And before I highlight the really important sections, I want to highlight the in our experience. So this is the way that we are humble about this theory, okay? So this is a system of thought. This is not a theory, it's a system of thought. And it's in our experience, right? So what I'm trying to say there, and what Abuna Gregory, when he wrote this, what he's trying to say is that we can only understand this from our experience. And something that we haven't talked about yet, but is so true, right, is that human minds, we are limited, very limited, right? We can only understand through 5 senses and what's in here. But God is unlimited, and the natural earth that we have is nearly unlimited, right? Because it's created by a perfect creator. So this is in our experience, right? As the limitation is of the human experience, we know that intelligence is the cause of their informational properties. So we're studying natural phenomena. We're looking for an intelligent cause. We're looking for intelligence, and we're going to see that through informational properties, okay? So what can we observe when intelligent agents act? Is anybody here intelligent? No. Definitely no? Okay. No, not Vicky. No. Nobody? Okay. Okay, do we have any siblings? Are there 2 siblings here? No? No twins? That's weird. Just joking. Okay, so I want you, okay, who has a sibling? Raise your hand. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Just you, I guess. Huh? Okay. Okay, so I want you, you may have seen something like this before. But let's say that have you guys ever seen anything like this, like the magnet letters? Maybe it's too old school, but I don't know. Magnet letters on a fridge. Okay, so let's say, you guys got them from the dollar store and threw them up there and it would just be a mess of letters, okay? So does that look like an intelligent person put it there? No, okay. But let's say you go to school and you come back and you see something like this. I promise I didn't make this. This was on the internet. But now does it look like, okay, let's not use the word intelligent, but now does it look like a person did this? Okay. How can you tell that a person did this and it wasn't random? What's that? Words. Language, right? Language is a highly organized thing. We're putting like 26 different letters together that have meaning, right? So we organize them in such a way that we can read them. If I disorganize those, does it still look like somebody came by and put those letters together? No, right? And if I look at that and I take out any of those words, does it still mean the same thing? The meaning changes, or maybe it doesn't have meaning, right? But let's say I take out face. Well, but does that mean anything if I say punch me in the? Right? Okay. So there's two pieces here, okay? So these are key terms. This is key vocabulary and will be tested. There's specified complexity, okay? This is the concept that this is complex, that there was foresight, there was will, and there was intentionality to this. That someone put those letters together with some foresight, that they knew that someone was going to see it, that there was a will, that they did it on purpose, that they wanted to do it, and that there was an intention, there was a goal, right? Maybe to make them laugh or, just to make them chuckle or get mad at them or whatever, right? But there was an intentionality, okay? So this is what's called specified complexity, okay? And you can kind of see where I'm going with this when it comes to nature and natural phenomena. There's another type of complexity. It's called irreducible complexity, meaning you cannot reduce it. Irreducible, meaning that you cannot simplify it more than it is there, okay? So if I take out any of those words, it doesn't mean anything. If I take out punch, then it's just in the face. If I take out in, if I take out the, or if I take out face, so basically it doesn't mean the same thing, and it may not mean anything at all, right? Okay, so that means that, let's say that someone came by and scrambled up the letters, okay? And then somehow, through the randomness that we experience in the world or in nature, that those letters came together to say the word punch. That'd be crazy, right? Like it just randomly said punch, right? Or some other word. But that does not have the same meaning as in the face, right? But let's say I scrambled up the letters and it said punch me in the face banana pudding. I can take out banana pudding and it means punch me in the face, right? So what I mean by that is that not only is it random, that randomness, if randomness could explain this, then it should also explain the fact that it cannot be reduced, right? So it means that we've landed in a sweet spot. Not only did the randomness produce something that has meaning, but a randomness would also have to produce something that only has meaning to this middle ground, right? Okay, I know it's a little bit confusing, but the point is you cannot simplify this, so that's intelligent, okay? Okay, So specified complexity is the concept that intelligent agents, something that has intelligence, use foresight, will, and intentionality to solve complex problems. Irreducible complexity means that the system that executes the task cannot be simplified, otherwise the task will not be done, right? We talked about that. So I want to talk about the scientific method. I think you probably have heard about the scientific method in school. Does anybody kind of have the general points? There's usually 4 things that we talk about. Yes, go ahead, Sam. Okay, question? Okay. Testing and then answer, yes. Conclusion, yes. So not only do you have a question, but then how do you arrive at your hypothesis? How do you get there? There's something in between question and hypothesis. You look at the world around you and you make observations, right? You observe something happening that either leads you to a question or leads you to a hypothesis, right? Okay, so and you're exactly right. So we're going to say observation and make a question, develop a hypothesis, testing, and then a conclusion, right? So we're going to make observations, develop a hypothesis, test your hypothesis, which is to experiment, and then make a conclusion, right? That is the scientific method. So again, intelligent design is not necessarily science, but it does borrow from scientific methods, scientific thoughts to make some definitions, right? Okay, so we're going to see how this scientific method works in real life. Who took one of these today? Half of you smell weird, so I wasn't sure. Okay, KG. Okay, so you would be the only person who can answer this question, but the rest of you, so what is this? It's a shower, okay. So how can we find out that, or what do we do before we enter the shower, right? What do we usually do? What's that? Okay, that's one piece. But right before I enter the shower, I want to make sure of something. It's warm, right? Warm, okay, I don't want to enter a cold shower. So, how can we find out what's going on here? What's the question? Going back to Cindy, what's the question here? Is the water warm? Okay, so what are the observations? Okay, steam. What else if you have a glass? It's like condensation, right? Okay, so we make observations. What's our hypothesis? It is warm based on what? If I see steam, then it may be warm, right? Or that it is warm is the hypothesis. How do you test your hypothesis in this case? You go in or you touch it with your hand, right? So you can test it with your hand. And then you make a conclusion, right, based on that. Okay, so now forever, if you see steam and every time you put your hand there, you repeat it several times. Every time you put your hand there, every time there's steam, you put your hand there, it touches your hand, and it's hot, that water's going to be hot. So now, how does that help us, right? So I want you to understand why this is important. So now, if we do that several times repeatedly, then, and that's a reproducible phenomena in the world, now, when I see steam, I can just walk right in, right? I don't have to test. I can. It's a reproducible result, but I don't have to, right? I can make an assumption now, right? And that's kind of the concept of what a theory is. So we're going to call this steam theory. If you see steam, it's going to be hot or warm, okay? Okay, so this is how we combine the intelligent design with the scientific method, okay? Intelligent design begins with the observation that intelligent agents produce complex and specified information, okay? So observation is that intelligent agents produce complex and specified information. And now we're going to hypothesize that a natural object that is designed must contain high levels of CSI. We're calling this CSI. It's not crime scene investigation. It's complex and specified information. And so everything that we're going to see that's made by an intelligent agent, something like this, will have high levels of complex and specified information. Punch me in the face, okay? So that is what we're going to try to find in our natural phenomena. So scientists, this is the general term, scientists, perform experimental tests on natural objects, and then they try to conclude if they contain this complex and specified information. What does that mean? That means if I look back at that fridge and I test to find out if there are words in this randomness, right? And I find words, does that mean that it's complex and specified? Does that mean that there could be a creator, right? An intelligent agent that acted there? Okay, so I want to give you an example, right? So the first example is in physics and cosmology. So this is kind of a study about probability, okay? So what would be the probability that this just happens randomly? Pretty low, right? Like if I just mixed up those letters and I got exactly like that, those letters off to the side, spaced out correctly with spaces in the middle and in order, that would be so low probability to get that randomly, right? It would be just like a 1 in a bajillion chance, okay? So is it more likely that to have been designed by someone, that it was placed by someone in order on purpose, or that it was random? Designed, right? Okay, so this is how we're going to look at natural phenomena. So scientists agree that the laws of the universe are finely tuned, that we have a perfect recipe to allow for the existence of advanced life. We're advanced life. I know not all of us are that advanced, Vicky, but the rest of us are advanced, right? Okay, so that this includes a bunch of science mumbo jumbo: masses of the electron, neutron, and proton, the strength of the strong and weak nuclear forces, so on and so forth. Okay, so these scientific concepts that require lots of studies to understand, they are so finely tuned to allow us to exist on this earth, right? And it's so much so that as far as we know, for as much as what we're trying to do, we are the only life forms that exist anywhere else in the universe, right? So this is an example of complex and specified information that it's so perfectly tuned, so perfectly results in this result that we're here, that it could point to the existence of an intelligent creator. So the odds of our universe appearing by chance, this is a calculation by some scientist that Dr. Gregory, Muna Gregory put together, but this is that it's less than a 1 in 10 to the 23rd chance that our universe exists in the way that it does. And so that's that number there, okay? So it's so improbable, right? Okay, so example 2 is how we see intelligent design in DNA. Anybody looked at DNA before? Cool. Smart people, all right. Anybody know what DNA stands for? Killing it. Yeah, deoxyribonucleic acid. Wonderful. So for the folks that have thought about DNA in school before, what is it? What is it? Is it real? Does it exist? Okay. How do we know that it exists? Someone said cells. Okay, cells. Yeah, so it's our genome, right? We can study it, we can pull it out, it's physical. We know that it's there. We can look at it under a microscope, an electron microscope, and we can see it. Okay, so it exists, it's there. What does it do? What's its purpose? Why do we think it exists? Okay, our genes, so what's the purpose of our genes? What do our genes do? Besides keep us nice and warm? No? It makes us what? It makes us different? Okay, so how does it make us different? What does it do? What do they do exactly? What's that? It makes us who we are, so not only our personality, but also our appearance, our skin, our hair, our traits, yes, physical traits and other traits too, okay? So this is the sort of the recipe for your body, okay? This is how our body makes the body, okay? So anybody know what these random letters are on the right? Nice. A+, yes. Those are the names of those, the C and the G and the T and the A. But so these are what's called nucleic acids, right? Nucleic acids. And they come in what? Can you ever put a T with a C? No, because they come in pairs, right? So so keep that in mind. They come in pairs, and they can never go with another one. See, because they wouldn't even fit, right? If you look at this picture, they wouldn't even fit together, right? So this is like something that's pointing to like something intelligent happened here, right? Okay. So anybody seen anything like this before? Like some. Oh, okay. Oh, that's a lot of. I think when I was their age, I don't think I'd ever seen anything like this. I know, right? Before using R. Okay, that's okay. So yeah, code, right? It's computer code, whatever, right? This is just a generic picture I found. I think it's HTML code. I can't tell, but yeah, it's HTML code. But in any case, so code, right? So I want to just let's take a step back from DNA. I want you to think about a random 26 letters, and that someone jumbled up 26 letters and it came up with that. How likely is that? Okay, so not only is it very unlikely to come up with this code, but to also have this code then get processed into something that looks like your website that you're looking at, right? Like you could come up with some code, but would it be meaningful? Would it result in anything useful to you, right? Or would it be like Google upside down? Like, that's not that useful, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So I want you now to think about the possible randomness that could have happened that then resulted in DNA, and then DNA being a meaningful product, right? Okay, so again, we're back here. And so DNA carries information, and this information is ordered. It is in a certain sequence. Genes are in a certain sequence to produce this beautiful thing you see in front of you, right? So, and the amount of items are so large that it will be completely improbable to have time, and this is using the self-organizational evolutionary model, trial and error, to rearrange them so you get to a successful functional intelligent system. So that's the concept that we're trying to bring up. It would be so improbable that that our DNA is millions of nucleic acids long, and somehow you could rearrange them randomly, even if you had like millions, billions of years to do so, and still get a perfect thing, right? Okay. And so this is not to contend with evolution, right? This doesn't mean that like evolution could not have existed, but it does mean that evolution, that it points to the fact that evolution could not have been fully self-organized, that it could have been totally random, right? Right? Because there seems to be a purpose to this, right? There seems to be a goal, right? Okay. So this system has the property of irreducible complexity, that we are irreducibly complex, the DNA, that there's no extras, right? There's not like a lot of stuff that we have to trim off of DNA. DNA is irreducibly complex. Okay, I think in the trying to keep us on time, I'm gonna skip this, but if we get time at the end, I'll share it with you guys. But this is just like giving us a sense of exactly how massive this probability is. Okay, it's using a deck of cards. Let's go to example 3. Intelligent design and biochemical info processing. So this is the next step, right? Okay, so we have DNA, we rearranged it, or we might be pointing to the fact that it's an intelligent designer that put DNA together, or that set things in motion such that we knew that creator knew that DNA was going to be the end result, and then ultimately that this perfect thing would be the end result, right? Okay, so how do we get to the next step? Not only did we have the computer code, okay, hold on, I think we lost it. Not only did we have the computer code, but that computer code also means something. It was processed into something that was useful, and the process of processing it was also perfect. Okay, does that make sense? So not only, okay, let me see if I can come up with a different example. Gas. Let's say gas. So, like gasoline for your car, okay? I know, so there's a lot of different gases. So this is not a perfect example, but I'm just trying to think of the easiest go-to, okay? So if you went to the store, you went to the grocery store, what are the chances that you could combine objects, pick 5 objects, combine 5 objects, and that if you put that in your car, that your car would drive, that your car would go, that it would fuel your car? The probability would be extremely, extremely low, right? Could you develop some sort of fuel out of like corn and some other stuff? Maybe, if you were intelligent and you knew that, but not randomly, right? Okay. So that's step 1. That was example 2 when we talked about DNA. So the fuel for the building blocks of our body is so random, or it could not have been explained totally by randomness. Not only that, but how likely is it that when I put it in the car, that it's going to make it go? Also low, right? How about also the process of making it, right? The process of actually building that fuel, that didn't go wrong somewhere in between, that the randomness somehow resulted in the fuel going in the car, and then that the car was able to go, right? That there's so many pieces. And so this is when we look at DNA. Not only do you have to have the correct information, which is the DNA, you have to process it correctly, right? So there's 2 pieces to processing DNA, transcription and translation. I put the kind of the concepts there. So transcription is the transcribing of DNA to RNA. Transcribing is just like you're taking notes from something else, right? So RNA is like the notes version of DNA. And then RNA gets converted to a product, which is proteins, right? So that's the translation, translated to something else. We have a little video here. I think you guys have probably seen something like this in school. We're going to skip it, but I want you to get an understanding if you've seen a video like this, right? I'm not even showing you the video, but I know you have a mental image of what this video looks like because we've seen it so many times. It's incredibly complex, right? But also so simple. Have you guys ever had that thought? It's it makes so much sense, I guess, but it is so complex, right? And you're like, my body is doing that right now? Yeah, it's happening. And so I want you to get it. So is this here incompatible with God? With an intelligent designer? No. If you see this, does it make you think, that there could not have been a God because this is the case? The building blocks of life are here. No. I think so many times what happens is I see this and I'm like, there has to be a God, right? This is so intelligent, so smart. This process works so well all the time in our body. We're making proteins all the time. Right now, you guys are making proteins. And we're doing it in this very complex way. And so that, to me, sometimes science is what I need to understand a God, how intelligent God is, okay? So we're going to skip that. Okay, and we're gonna jump into history for the last few minutes. So this is kind of we reached the end of how we're looking at God from the science perspective, but there's so much more, right? What we didn't even get into, and it is usually a huge thing, is what is this evolution thing, and how does our church view it, but also how can we use it to understand God, right? How can we use it to give evidence to a creator? So we haven't done that, but I want you to read that article that Abuna Moses wrote, and then it's also something we can talk about as time goes on. So far, I told you that I wanted to encourage questions. Did we have any questions? Did that get you to start thinking, or maybe have questions about what we talked about so far? Are you sleeping? You guys doing okay? Only Vicky? Only Vicky sleeping? Was this interesting? Was this cool? Do we like this so far? Okay, good. So questions? None of that was, I answered all your questions? Wow, all right. Yeah. I put my email at the very beginning, and so if you guys got the slides, you guys can email me. Like because a lot of times what happens is you'll be on the way home and you'll be like, wait, I have a question. And when that happens, I want you to email me. And you can look into it yourself, but also email me so we can maybe get some of the patristics, right? You guys got into some patristics a little bit. We can use some of the writings of the fathers and the intelligence of KG to answer some of those questions. Okay, so let's move to history and then we'll be done in a minute.
There's a really good book about what the fathers say about creation, and it's like almost like an index of fathers, okay? And it has like everything from Athanasius to, there was one of them with a name that has an X in it. But anyway, it's like all the fathers that they've spoken about creation, and you'd be surprised at how many of them have such varying opinions on how creation happened versus evolution happens versus, it's crazy. But it's a really like almost like a dictionary book with all the fathers and what they say about evolution. I wrote a paper on it when I was in seminary, so it's really, really interesting stuff. So anyway, there you go.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to say that the short of the long is that there is a compatibility. I mean, and again, there is even varying views on this, but there is compatibility between evolution and what we believe in the church. So it's okay to consider that. It's okay to allow yourself. Remember, in non-essentials, what is the word? Liberty. Okay, I'm going to test you on that. Okay, so I want you guys to pay attention. In non-essentials, liberty. So I want you to be able to start to potentially consider that, okay? And then we can kind of move forward. So let's talk about history. So history has two major factors. The actual events that happened, like what actually happened, that's the objective. That's like the things, you guys already took some church history, right? So these are the facts. These are the things that happened, right? Versus the recording of these events, right? And this is like who saw it, who investigated it, who heard about it, and what did they think about it? What was their bias on it? And that's more subjective, right? You guys have heard these words objective and subjective before? Yeah, objective is like factual, the things that are there that I see, that I know, versus subjective is kind of like what I think about it, or what does the other person think about it, right? Okay. Can you guys figure out what's going on in this picture without me telling you? Huh? Gossip, not only gossip. How about what if they were playing a game? Telephone, okay, so this is a telephone game, okay? So history can sometimes be a game of telephone, right? And so on the far left here, I want you to kind of consider that this is the actual events, right? What actually happened is what was the actual word at the start of telephone, right? Has anybody played telephone? Raise your hand. Okay, how do you guys play the game? Yeah, okay. So, and what usually happens, Helen, at the end? It's not the same thing as the beginning. Okay. So usually like as Helen said, someone starts with a specific word and they whisper into the next person's ear, and then that person will whisper what they think that they heard into the next person's ear, and so on and so forth till you get to the end. And at the end, that person gets to say what they heard, and it's almost always something completely different than where it started, right? And it kind of also depends on how many people are in between. And so when we look at our apostolic nature in our Christianity, and we're going to get to that in level 3, our telephone is a little bit shorter than some others. So in this case, on the far left is where we have the objective, right? We have the first word, the eyewitness, right? This is like that. The first person is so important because that's the person that witnessed it for real the first time, right? Was there. They heard the word, right? And at the very end, that person's so far removed from the original that is subjective, right? That person has to either investigate it very well and ask everybody up the line and ask questions and try to find out, or that they have to just take what they get, right? Okay. So this is where we get to talk about historical sources. Don't be afraid of all the words on this slide. I'm not going to test you on everything on here. I'll tell you what I'm going to talk about. But the main things I want to define is primary sources, and then on the next slide we're going to talk about secondary sources. Have you guys talked about this before in school? Whenever you're referencing something, they sometimes tell you, I need you to give me 5 primary sources, and then everything else can be a secondary source. Have you guys ever heard of that before? Okay, I remember that happening. That doesn't happen anymore in college. Everything has to be a primary source. But so this in history, we talk about this too. So primary sources are underived, firsthand. So underived meaning somebody didn't just come up with it, they saw it, right? Firsthand and contemporary with the event, meaning that they were there. They saw it, and are much more crucial because they saw it. And they may consist of eyewitness testimony given in various forms. So there's primary literary and primary non-literary sources. So there's written documents, that's the literary. They're either official documents or unofficial documents. And one example is Pliny the Younger's famous letters that we're going to talk about later. And then there are non-literary primary sources. So these are things that are maybe slightly less important, but can be so powerful, right? And helping us understand what events happen. But so sometimes this can be recordings in the last 100 years since we've had a way to do recordings, audio recordings. If you ask Dr. Vicky, she has recordings from interviews that she's studied, right? And that's really important. But also oral tradition, right? The way that we've passed down information over time, photographs, and then archaeological artifacts, okay? So this is like reports, legends, heroic stories, songs, and ballads. This can be somewhere primary or secondary, but the concept is that this can be a primary source. And so, for example, if we look at it archaeologically, there's the Jewish burial sites where we can learn about burial customs, the human physical characteristics of the time, and the variety of punishments that occurred during the Jewish period, in a Roman period, for Jewish folks. And so that we can learn about that just based off of what's still there, right? Artifacts. Excavations of the Dead Sea, we got the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then we can learn about the Essenes, the people that lived around the same time as Christ. And then the Greek cities, like uncovering these Greek cities, these old Greek cities like Athens, Corinth, and Ephesus. This is how we can learn about the art, the religious beliefs, and the lifestyle of the people at that time. And then the last piece is going to be, for today, it's going to be the Pre Pauline Creed, okay? So we talked at the very beginning about what we have now, our beautiful, well-refined, what do we call it? Orthodox Creed, okay? This is a different creed. This is a very early creed, like the earliest of all Christian creeds, okay? It's called the Pre Pauline Creed, and it's a very important piece. And it comes down to a few verses in 1 Corinthians. Who wrote 1 Corinthians? Who wrote that epistle? Ooh. St. Paul. Very good. Very good. So it is, we call Corinthians and several other epistles, what we call them, the what? The Pauline epistles, okay? And we use excerpts from that during the liturgy. And then the other epistles that we have in the New Testament, what is that group called? Written by anybody else but Paul. They're called, there's Pauline epistles, and there's a few others, and they have a different name, a different group. Catholic epistles, very good, okay? So, but this is, 1 Corinthians is a Pauline epistle, is written by St. Paul, and in the first few verses of chapter 15, so, and in verse 1 up to verse 11, I think I'll talk about that. From 1 to 11 is what's called the Pre Pauline Creed, specifically this verse here, and I want you to pay close attention because it might be on a test somewhere. 1 Corinthians 15, 3 to 4, okay? For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures. Okay, this has been the subject of a lot of study. A lot of people have looked into this. And why is this important? Can anybody take a guess? Why? And it's a little bit hard to understand, but I want you to try to think about it. Why could this possibly be important? This thing here. based on what we just talked about. Remember, we talked about primary and secondary sources. I hear whispering. I hear telephone. Okay, very early creed, primary. So who wrote it, right? The key thing is we are almost certain that St. Paul wrote this, right? Because we think St. Paul wrote, he actually titled at the very beginning of 1 Corinthians that it was him, Paul, the servant of the Lord. So he wrote this, right? And in what era did St. Paul live? Mother-in-law. Jeez. What era did St. Paul live? Okay, let me give you multiple choice. Did St. Paul meet Christ? Did St. Paul ever meet Christ? Did he say, I hi to Jesus Christ and shake his hand in the flesh? What'd you say? No, he didn't, right? He saw a vision of him, right? Okay, so it was after his crucifixion, right? Okay, so does anybody have a general idea if we look at the BC AD system, like what year the crucifixion is thought to have happened? 33, very good. Okay, so like the mid-30s, the AD mid-30s. So, and then when did St. Paul live? Was he around that time, or was he like 100 years later? No, he was around that time. So St. Paul was alive at the same time Christ was alive, right? But he just didn't see him. He wasn't there, okay? Because he's from somewhere else. So St. Paul being around at that time, having written this, may mean that he got this when he says, "For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received." And being around the people that were there may mean this is the closest we get to eyewitness testimony, right? Besides the Gospels. So this supports the Gospels, right? We have the Gospels, but let's say you were like, okay, let's throw out the Gospels. Let's not believe in the Gospels. This other guy who was not with him, not with Christ, also wrote this. That's support, right? That's a primary. That's as close as we're going to get to a primary source, right? It could be a primary source. So there's 5 points to this, okay? And I just want you to understand the concepts here. So this is the first concept we just talked about, that this was delivered. He talks about being delivered and received. And these are technical terms. This is like he didn't just make these words up. These are actual words for how tradition gets passed down. And he's saying that this is not something he wrote, but he got it from somewhere else, okay? The other thing that makes us think that Paul didn't just invent this is that a lot of these words, a lot of people feel that St. Paul would not have used these words, because was St. Paul Jewish? No, I see some shaking of heads. St. Paul was not Jewish, right? He was a Gentile. So, but the words that are used here, and we're going to talk about it, the words that are used here may even have like a Jewish origin. And then that there's a parallel form to this, right? That you can see that there's 3 different lines that start with that. And then that's like an oral nature, right? That this came from an oral tradition. In this section, chapter 15, verse 1 through 11, there are, they use, in the Aramaic version, they use Cephas for Peter, which means that this maybe came from a Jewish text initially. And finally, that this accordance with the scriptures piece, that's like a Jewish way of saying something, which again, St. Paul was not Jewish, so he wouldn't have made that all up on his own. So he must have heard it from someone else. Is that the concept? And that means that could be an indication that in that very early period that we have evidence outside of the Gospels that these events occurred, right? Does that kind of make sense? Okay. And this is how we kind of we already talked about this, but this is kind of how we got to how early this creed could have existed, okay? So this is the last slide. There are 4 known historical facts based on this. Jesus' death due to crucifixion. This is like historians that are Christian, historians that are not Christian, across the board, the vast majority of critical historians agree with these 4 facts: that there was a guy named Jesus, that he was crucified, that there are people around that time that had literal appearances of Jesus, that they believed that they saw Jesus literally appear to them, that they had transformed, that this group of people had changed in some way, and that St. Paul, totally separate from all of this, completely on a different part of the continent, also had an appearance and was converted, and that he also believed in a risen Jesus who he had never met. Okay? And so these 4 facts are agreed upon by all historians and are very critical. And so we are going to move on in the next unit more about history, and we're going to get into a really interesting topic, which is the Shroud of Turin. Has anybody heard about the Shroud of Turin? Okay, so it's going to be a treat then. It's a really exciting part. And so that's it for today. I know we went over. Do we have any questions that I can write down? No? Did I bore you guys? Was it hard? No? We didn't like it? It's a little bit dense. I promise I'm trying to make the material as light as possible, because if I encourage you to go and review, or if you want to look at it and take notes, but you don't need to absolutely do that. But if you read it, it's a little bit dense to read. So I promise I'm trying to break it down. Okay? All right. No questions? You can email me. So you guys have the slides, but I'm going to show you the first slide one more time in case someone wants to take down my email. Email me if you have any questions in the meantime, and then we will pray, and then we can go. Okay? Cool. All right, let's stand up for prayer. Anybody want to pray? No? I'll pray. Okay. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Thank you, God, for bringing us here to be in your house and in your midst. And as you say, if there are any 2 that meet in my name, you'll be in their midst, so please be between us as we consider the incredible works of art and of science that you have placed around us, as we look into those things and truly understand your intelligence and in your greatness. And also at the same time understand the limitation of our minds and our understanding, but the immense and the omnipotence of yours, and that you justify your will in our lives, that you give us direction, because your will is much greater than ours. It is the only great will, and that truly that we are, in the course of this unit, that we're able to give a defense of our faith in the way that you have given as a gift to others in the course of history. And as we move on in our unit, that as we have questions, that we feel free to come to you with questions, and that we are open to the answers, and that ultimately our faith becomes deeper and deeper in you. And through the intercessions of Saint Justina and Saint Mary, Pope Carolus, and all of the holy saints, hear us when we say thankfully, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Through Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.